landscape. The question is, will we do it 20 years or will we take 100 years to do it? What's the pace and scale of deploying the solutions that are in the nutrient strategy? It's 5 years old. And please pull down the current report. I'm here to say that if you look at the reports each year, you can see some maturity developing. It's not adequate in my book. It's by a long stretch. We're only capable of deploying at the pace and scale. It's dependent on resource capacity. So, as Mark talked about, he has to have access to capital to do an operation. And so what are some of the requirements? First of all, I need shared vision. I need people that want to work with agriculture. And I need agriculture that wants to work with people. And I already said it earlier, we need each other. So we need shared vision. We need more innovation. We need a portfolio of economically viable operations. If we're going to re-envision the Iowa agricultural landscape that's viable, they have to be economically viable, or it is unsustainable. And I'll go back to the sustainability box. And I'm working with the supply chain. Walmart wants their food manufacturers to produce products that have sustainable ingredients. And so let's come down. So the food manufacturers need processors that source their products. It has to be sustainable all the way down to the farmer. Now, how do you prove all that? And how do you capture the transactional cost up and down the system to make these claims true? It's complicated. Has to be sophisticated. More sophisticated than it is today. And coupled with this, though, and the reason we have so many impaired water bodies, and I'm not going to argue with you that the water's good or bad. I believe it could be a lot better. But if there's one thing that we've got in the nutrient strategy that we didn't have even 5 years ago, is the monitoring and the measurement of the condition of our waters. And for years, this state has been starved. The state agencies have been starved. Don't collect the data. We don't know. We don't want to know, right? Well, at the Soybean Association, we put in a water quality lab. I actually hired the Des Moines Water Works to design our water quality lab in our office. And today we do more sampling than the state does for farmers, so that we know where to work, so that we can measure how we're doing, so that we can target taxpayer investment. Because some of these practices aren't going to work everywhere, the practices that are in the nutrient strategy. So we're at the front end of a revolution in this state, I believe. I want it to be much bigger and much faster. Our association wants it to be bigger and faster. All these issues compete, right? Then you bring in the politics and all the other things. We'll probably talk about that.
Get there.
So I'll stop with that, but key things: shared vision. We have to be working with one another. Innovation. We have to have access to capital, whether that's private capital or public capital. Bottom line is it has to be paid for.
Can I ask one follow-up?
You bet.
So shared vision, I think when we say that in the state, we all say, well, we can all agree we need clean water. So tell me what isn't shared about the vision, or what the challenges are to that specific piece of it, from your perspective.
Well, so I'll talk about it this way. 2 days ago, we had our soybean research, farmer research conference. And we played what's called a watershed game, where we put a watershed map on a table, and we took the practices, and we had farmers that have this kind of money and that kind of money. It was a simulated real-life situation. Well, the net effect of actually putting people at a table and having to think about this is way different than me telling you that, you know, it's all going to be okay, and here's what the water quality is, and you know, we need to get people's head in the game. And not everybody's head is in the game. These are complicated issues. How do the practices perform? Where can they be deployed? How much do they cost? How long do they last? How do you pay for it? Upstream, downstream. You know, so when I say shared vision, I'm not asking, telling, and selling. I'm saying, sit down with us and let's have a conversation and figure it out. That's shared vision. That requires a lot more energy, and people want sound bites. People want sound bites on this.
Thank you. Bill?
What's missing? Political leadership. Roger talked about my statement that the Iowa nutrient reduction strategy has sound science in it. It does. It has horrible public policy. The public policy of this state is voluntarily farmers will spend their money to provide a conservation practice that'll improve the environment. That is a challenging public policy to wrest the safety and health of downstream users of water on. It's failed in the past, it will fail in the future. In this state, the Iowa Farm Bureau controls the legislature and it controls the executive branch of government. Those of us who have tried to move this on the political front continue to feel that forced resistance. But this state is changing. You know, we live and work and study and survive in this beautiful bubble like Grinnell, Iowa, or Des Moines, Iowa. The state is dying in its rural communities, away from pockets of prosperity like this. We're back to this utopia, but it's a reality. We are becoming a sacrifice state. We are beginning to look like West Virginia, where there are urban and rural divides that are significant. We have to get past the platitudes of everybody wants safe drinking water, and everybody wants to support family farming, and let's feed the world. Okay, let's set all that aside. The reality is that industrial agriculture is heavily subsidized by you and I as taxpayers. We have really two options to reach a public health outcome, in my view. We can regulate. Ooh, we don't want to use that term, and I'm sure we'll hear a lot more about how anti-regulatory center of gravity is crushing everyone at 8 o'clock, or we can tie the subsidies that you and I or others are pumping into agriculture to a conservation result. That's what we need to do, and we need political leadership to be able to do that, but there is significant forced resistance in Iowa, in particular, to be able to do that. We are overcoming that, and we will continue to overcome that resistance because, again, Iowa is changing. My 500,000 customers, whether they live in very affluent West Des Moines or Johnston, Rogers suburb, or they live in the inner city of Des Moines, no longer view the Farm Bureau as the godfather of Iowa. We will continue to push forward with political leadership here to treat environmental protection as a value of the state. The state has looked past that value, whether it's a drinking water issue or whether it's a recreational use of water issue. Who wants to go swimming in the surface waters of this state, or go kayaking or boating or whatever it may be? When I have a chance and want to go someplace with clean water, I go to Wisconsin or Minnesota where they're able to better strike the balance between agriculture and good surface water. This state continues to go down a path that it's hewn for now decades that says the key to industrial agriculture is to have its residents tolerate a bad environment. We're going to continue to push on that. The science here is not nearly as complicated as Roger has talked about. We have leaky soils and an industrial model that are moving nutrients and bacteria into the waters of this state at an unacceptable level and are threatening public health. We can either deal with this now before it becomes a crisis or after it becomes a crisis. Hopefully, sane minds will prevail here and will believe that agriculture and environmental protection can coexist. The most productive state in terms of dollars in agriculture is in Iowa. I believe it's California. And for those of you who are from that area or visit that area, know there are significant environmental protections in the state of California. We can do it, we will do it, and talk about we need more time and it's complicated are nothing more than a defense of the status quo. The status quo is not working. This is not about a few bad farmers. This is about a model of industrial agriculture that's failed and is unsustainable.
So I'm going to ask one more question and then I think turn it over to all y'all to ask some questions, so be thinking about them. And I hope you'll indulge me a quick anecdote because I want to bring in a new population that we haven't talked about as much yet, and that is the consumer, right? Whoever they are, because everybody drinks, but also everybody eats. So they're sort of important in this. And this summer I was at a conference that was devoted to ag in the classroom and getting STEM curricula as part of K through 12, not your typical VOAG course, but just K through 12 programming. It was largely put on by the Farm Bureau, and there were a couple of interesting threads, and one was frustration from those in the ag industry about consumers' lack of understanding of science and how it relates to ag, and therefore the way it results in this criticism of agriculture. And the perspective was, people don't get the science, so they don't understand why what we're doing is good or bad, because people don't understand how the science works. And they felt under attack for that. So that was one thread. And the other thread was that I was there at the same time, some mainstream media outlet had published a poll that showed that most Americans thought that chocolate milk came from brown cows. And this got brought up over and over and over as evidence that consumers were distant from agriculture. And I went away thinking, now, it's a bit of an odd balance to say, on the one hand, consumers are reading the wrong science and they're being critical of agriculture to sort of reinforce their negative views of agriculture, and then I'm a social scientist. I didn't do a lot of research into that poll. I'm pretty sure most people don't think that chocolate milk comes from brown. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say, I think that's probably kind of a bunk poll, right? It doesn't really tell us anything about what consumers know about agriculture, but it was used over and over as evidence that people didn't understand. And I thought, how interesting that, of course, we all, we have a lot of information at our disposal, and we often take what reinforces our preconceived notions. So getting back to the poor consumer who's so confused that they don't know where the milk comes from, I'm wondering where you see the consumer's role in this, and who should they be listening to help work through these issues? Because I think if part of the equation is changing political will, there's a role, right? There's a consumer role there as well. So where do they fit in, and who should they be listening to? What kind of science should they be consuming to sort of make informed decisions? And I'll actually break up the line here, and I won't make you go first, Mark, unless you really want to, but whoever wants to jump in.
I'll jump in, if I may. Science isn't an ideology, it's a process, right? Those of us who are scientists and have that background know that it's evolving, it's changing, it's providing answers that are challenged and changed with better science. Who should consumers rely on? I think consumers will make the right choices. I personally, probably not a surprise to you, don't watch Fox News. Some people do. That's fine. As consumers, we have a responsibility, I think, to educate ourselves as best and as practically as we can about our decisions. But I'll tell you, I am not a subject matter expert in building cars or knowing the technology behind Tesla. I try to make wise consumption decisions on a number of different fronts. But when we talk about safety and public health, it's a whole different dimension, I think, to the discussions. And when we're talking about an abuse or a misuse of public resources, incenting the wrong behavior that are kicking past triggers of public safety and public health, then I think consumers flock towards whatever sources they think are most appropriate. Unfortunately, we live in an anti-science world right now. We have a president who thinks that climate science is a Chinese hoax and that fake news is anything that one of us disagrees with. The ideology doesn't square with our world. The science in terms of agriculture, I think, is pretty straightforward. Agriculture is not a monolith, as the visual aid will indicate to you. There are great CSAs, great local food folks out there, some in our audience right now. How is that for a shameless plug, Andy? Grinnell Heritage Farms. There are alternatives to our current method of consumption. I earlier today was with a group called Mighty Earth. Mighty Earth is a group that's challenging Tyson, as an example, to use more humane and conservation-related practices in the supply chain as to who they receive livestock from, making sure that the farmers that provide corn or soybeans in that chain are using conservation practices. We as consumers have the ability to be able to challenge those kinds of things en masse. Pretty tough as individuals. But science is changing. There are great sources for science-related information, and you can choose wherever your ideology takes you. But some things are really fairly well established in the world of science, like the risks of climate change as a real issue, no matter how loud I can say that I think it's a Chinese hoax, or no matter how often I say that gravity is in your mind and you can jump off the rail up there, there's certainly evidence to prove otherwise. The evidence in this world, I think, is very clear, and that is the current model of industrial agriculture is threatening not only your economics, not only your community, but your environment and your public health.
Has it been challenging to communicate that, to the consumers in your region or beyond?
You know, it really
if
isn't.
It's straightforward, then why is it so hard?
It really isn't. There significant political resistance. The Farm Bureau ran a $1 million TV campaign against the organization I work for. Had a grainy black and white photo of me in those TV ads because we challenged in a legal forum industrial agriculture and lost. I thought I'd beat you to that one, Roger. We did lose. I'm aware of that. But the point is that I think consumers understand some very basic issues, and that is they don't want to think about the glass of water they're drawing from a tap. They want to worry about their grades or their job or their grad school, whatever it may be. But this commodity doesn't come to you without a lot of regulation and a lot of concern about public health and safety. The precursors, the upstream folks that impact our ability to do that need to be held accountable either through regulation or removing the public subsidies that they get that are challenging your safety as a water consumer.
Roger. Mark?
So I have very limited comment on this. Not that I want to duck it, but I'm not an expert in this space. But I will offer this. Having a father of 4 children that are now adults, and a wife that is pre-med, and myself, geography, and I agree, Bill, that the science is pretty well established and it's evolving. But here's the thing: I think some people that, well, I think science needs to be hands-on. We can't market science, in my view. Now, I just watched, Bill Nye, the science guy? I'm sucked into that on TV.
If there's a marketer of science, he might
Yeah,
be it.
he's the marketer of
be it.
science.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so yeah, maybe that's the answer, but I'm not the expert, right, on that deal. But here's the thing. The farmers, and there are many of them, and one thing Bill and I do not agree on is the industrial model of agriculture, because these are family farmers. They're smart people. They're businessmen. And so I disagree with that characterization. I get that the political realities are challenging, but at the same time, I challenge people to go out and meet with these folks. They're open to having a conversation about the science that they're using every day on their farms. Come on out, and we do that. That's, and it's challenging, right? There are people that want to differentiate their thing by villainizing someone else. And that's part of marketing. That's just part of marketing. And I can't buy into that. I got to stay focused on impacting what I can impact. And and the good news is there's amazing science today. And how do we deploy more of that? And people ask me sometimes, Roger, what's your favorite thing about your job? It's about creating other jobs. I need an army of people, young people. I just hired a kid right out of college, and he is passionate. He wanted to work for no money to get a job. And that charges me up, and he's got his degree from Iowa State, and he's passionate, and he's having an impact. So hands-on science is what I believe in. Talk to people and learn about it. And we need to put those people in these schools and bring them out to the farms.
Roger, can we agree that something like the Leopold Center for Sustainable Ag and Ames should have been fully funded so that there is an alternative to the Monsanto, Dow, DuPont monopoly, if you will, of education and research dollars going into Iowa State?
I'm a big supporter of the Leopold Center. I have a lot of friends and colleagues that I've worked with for a lot of years at the Leopold Center. Most of the research and the nutrient strategy came from the Leopold Center. A lot of people don't know that, but that's the truth of it. I mean, they're 25, 26 years old, right? I think one of the problems is that, you can't be complacent in talking about, and unfortunately, they can't, as a public institution, they can't go lobby on their behalf. So they're vulnerable. They need to reinvent themselves. And I think the veto that preserved the Leopold Center without funding, I'd love to have seen them get funded, but the truth is they got to reinvent themselves. And that's a work in progress right now. But it's not just the Leopold Center, it's the University of Iowa and the other, the three regent universities. I mean, what is their role? We have to leverage research. That's where we get return on investment. The land grant systems have been around since the 1800s. And we've made a lot of return on investment from those institutions, not just the Leopold Center. But I'm a big fan of the Leopold Center.
I've never heard them termed as complacent before, Roger, and the fact that they have to reinvent themselves, I think, is a complete degradation of their charter. Their charter is clear. The real problem is the Leopold Center for Sustainable Agriculture clearly challenged the industrial ag model that I'm talking about. And for that reason, they were obliterated. Governor Branstad may, and some in the ag community may think it's great that he retained the name, and it remains up there. It's a hollow shell, and it needs to be fully funded, and there needs to be a clear message sent back of academic freedom, in research and the Leopold Center's role in moving Iowa forward. And your organization and others can take a leadership role in making that happen. There are bills now on the Iowa House floor to fund it at $1 million.
Mark, do you want to add anything about the consumer?
Um,
How to get the word out to them?
Yeah, sure. As a farmer, I watch the markets 5.5 days a week. They go up, they go down, and that's my message system from the consumer. So at this moment in time, the consumer says that they don't want my product, or they want it for less. That's the message that I'm receiving. And so, again, I sell my crop that I grow, and it goes off into this market, and the consumer buys or doesn't buy. That's the only way that I can decipher what's going on. I see ads on TV. There are programs that I can participate. Unilever was one with the soybeans, and they had an ad campaign that we saw in this TV market. And so that we did get 10 cents a bushel on our soybeans if we sold them in a certain delivery point. And that program has just changed, and they're not willing to pay that 10 cents. We can still partake in the program, but we won't be paid anything. And so the message to me is that consumers don't care. So I have to believe then that it doesn't matter. And so I believe that the consumers have to choose with their spending dollars and the pitter-patter of their feet either into or out of a store that says, I want this product. Yes, it might be more expensive, but that's the product I want. If I know that, then I can produce for that market. So right now, exactly as Bill has said, this industrial model says produce as much as I can. And why is the consumer complaining? They're getting exactly what they want. They're buying the product that's on the shelf.
Fair enough. I would like to turn it over to all of you if there are questions. And I think Dr. Trish has a mic.
You need to speak into the microphone. Is this working? Oh, I'll try to find another.
Well, Andy's ready to shout, so shout.
So when we're talking about markets, I think we all have to be on the same page in that agricultural markets, especially for the commodities that we produce here in Iowa, are most assuredly not a free market. The government really has dictated what is grown in Iowa through, right now it used to be direct subsidies to the farmers, and now it's federally subsidized crop insurance. And we also have pretty much all of the markets that exist for corn and soybeans all came out of our land grant colleges. So if you think corn-based ethanol, if you think about pretty much all of the products that we make with these commodities, it came out of some government money. And so the public policy aspect of it, if we want to see some diversification in the landscape, it's probably going to take a similar push from the government to make it happen. Can I hear what y'all have to say about that?
Sure, you're exactly right. When we work with FSA, if we would do vegetables, we are foregoing any acres of vegetables, including sweet corn, do not participate in the farm program.